Welcome to the Children and Families Committee. And before we start, I'm going to ask Senator Payne, what's your mic number? 11?
Number 11.
To open us up in prayer.
Let's bow our head and pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you today, Lord, and we just thank you first and foremost for all of our many blessings. Thank you for the air that fills our lungs that comes only with purpose to serve. Lord, let us find our purpose in you, that we would be led of you to do all your will and not just of our own. Father, we just ask you to give us clear eye and mind of discernment in all that we do. For it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, we have one bill on our agenda this morning. It's House Bill 144, and there is now a substitute to that, which was formerly House Bill 30. And Lieutenant Governor's Office feels this issues of public importance and should be considered by the Senate. So that is why we're talking about this morning. Threats and attacks against the Jewish children and families in all of our districts can't be tolerated in Georgia. This bill has been thoroughly publicly vetted, and here's how we're going to proceed. We have a hard stop at 8:50 because many of our members have to go to another meeting, and so we need to be sure that we're finished by then. And we're going to have the author present the bill and take questions from the committee. Then we are going to allow some public testimony, although there's been a lot of public testimony on this bill already. And the way that's going to work is we're going to have 15 minutes for people that are opposed to the bill and 15 minutes for people that are in favor of the bill. And feel free to yield your time if your point's already been made. And I would ask people to be as brief as you can. We also need everyone to be respectful, and we don't have any disruptions in our Senate committees, so please keep that in mind. And we will have discussion by the committee, but we're not going to entertain any amendments. And so with that, I'll ask Representative Carson to come and present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I'm presenting before you the substitute to House Bill 144. Many of you know this as the anti-Semitism bill that this legislature has been debating this year. What this basically does is, and just for clarity, I'm working on LC 491454S. What this basically does is, codifies a definition of anti-Semitism per the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. All this bill does really is ensure that when analyzing intent behind illegal discriminatory actions that target Jewish people, whether it involves a hate crime or illegal discriminatory actions, that there is an allegation that the action was motivated by anti-Jewish sentiment, and that the relevant authorities consider the world's most accepted definition of anti-Semitism by IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. I have a printout, Madam Chair, if members want to see it in regard to what that definition is, but I think we've talked about this in length in both bodies, in both chambers. But I'm happy to share. I have several copies of that. What this bill does not do, it does not in any way limit or chill anyone's freedom of speech, what have you. You can take a look at the bill substitute. If you take a look at lines 29 through 34, I'll just read the first sentence or two. Nothing in this code section shall be construed to diminish or infringe upon any right protected under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In addition to that, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism literally says, however, criticism of Israel, and I'm quoting here from the definition from IHRA, criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. And that's just an excerpt. Groups in support of this, you have a letter in your packet. I'm just going to hold this up. Sorry, mine's in color. Maybe yours is in black and white. I want to encourage you to understand the persecution that the Jewish community is under, even though they only make up 1.5% of the Georgia population. They probably are targeted with over 50%, maybe 60% of all the crimes, hate crimes, persecution in the state. This bill is very similar to or almost identical to what has been passed in Arizona, Iowa, Tennessee, Arkansas, several other states, I think about 6 or 7 or 8 states by statute, about 22 states in total by resolution. This definition has been adopted by 1,100 separate governments, non-governmental entities, most of the EU nations. It's also been adopted by the U.S. State Department, U.S. Department of Education, and as you can see on lines of the bill, on lines 16, 17, and 18, it's also been adopted as a presidential executive order. And it's also been enforced by the prior president, and it's been enforced by the current president and the current administration. The biggest question I get, Madam Chair and members of the committee, is why is this necessary? The Jewish identity is multifaceted and it's complex. It incorporates race, religion, culture, national origin, and ethnicity. And it's not just one simple thing. Some people can put up a swastika and say, I'm making a political statement. No, you're making an anti-Semitic statement. With that, I know we have a number of speakers, and honestly, this legislature has debated this quite a bit. I'm happy to take questions or at the pleasure of the chair. I do have with me Mark Goldfeder. Mark, if I may, Madam Chair, he's kind of a legal scholar on these issues, constitutional scholar, and I'm happy to help have him, if you may, at the chair's indulgence, help him answer technical questions. But with that, I would just ask for the committee's support in this matter.
Thank you. We're going to take some questions from the committee.
Sure.
Okay, Senator Robertson.
Representative, thank you for bringing this legislation forward. I got a question for you or your esteemed attorney. Why IRA?
IRA is the internationally recognized definition of anti-Semitism. It's been thought out, vetted extensively by various professors, went through a 3-year working process. It's been adopted by non-governmental entities. It's been adopted by government bodies around the world, including, as I mentioned, a number of states, as well as the U.S. Department of State, U.S. Department of Education, and the prior president's executive order, which the current president is enforcing. I would not want there to be another definition such that what is anti-Semitic under state law is not in other words, there's differences between state and federal law in regard to what is anti-Semitic behavior. So thank you for that.
So uniformity matters?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Senator. I would just add that the IRA definition was put together over years by subject matter experts across 50 different countries. It's been vetted. It's been adopted by presidents of both parties, UN Secretary General, and others. And more importantly, it is accepted by the vast majority of Jews as actually reflecting their shared experience of what anti-Semitism is and how it manifests itself. It's true, and that's why it's a good definition. In terms of why it's a good definition for this bill, the IRA definition focuses less on why people hate and more focuses on manifestations of what people do when they hate. It's a praxeological or a conduct-based definition, if you will, which is what you need when you're looking for this kind of definition.
Senator Merritt?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, everyone. And I do understand the intent of this bill. The actual intent of the bill, I have no problem with. I'm a black woman from the South. I understand hate. We don't want, any postings of anti-hate of anyone or any group. And I do think we passed our anti-hate bill in this body, a couple years ago. And it should cover what we're trying to do here. I would have said go ahead and add an amendment to that particular bill. And I guess our concern is the definition of IRA. That is the sticking point here. And I do believe this was heard in another committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Was there a problem with what the Judiciary Committee did that day?
There was.
Okay. Can you explain to me what?
Essentially, just to Senator Robertson's question, we're about conformity here, and what the Senate Judiciary did is by a 1-vote margin adopted a definition other than IRA for anti-Semitism.
Okay, if I may, Madam Chair. Okay, so because the problem is the IRA definition, that definition is very broad. I get what you're saying, but under that definition, and I've seen it, there are several what anti-Semitism means. And the concern is it could be used, if interpreted strictly by law, to censor free speech. And that's what we don't want. And I just did some research myself, because it could be used in that way. It could be, because the language under the IRA definition is, I've seen it, it's a lot there, that it could threaten, our academics, the protests for students, and even the author himself, Kenneth Stern, he warned that it could undermine the fight of anti-Semitism and charges of anti-Semitism. So he was in concern, and this was only supposed to be a working definition. It wasn't intended just yet to be the definition that we're going to codify into law. And I have huge concerns if we're going to codify this into law as it applies to our state, because here it's all state agencies shall consider anti-Semitism as evidence of discriminatory intent for any criminal or non-criminal law policy in this state which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or religion. So I have some concerns. Sure. And I get what you're trying to do. I really do. But I think the vagueness might leave us open to some trouble later. And that's what we don't want. So that's my question. How do we...
Senator, I very much appreciate that. And if it's okay, I'd like to respond, if I can, to several of the points. First, in regard to what Ken Stern actually said, and this is not your fault. He's been misquoted on this so many times. He's written about it in 3 places, including Chapter 7 of his book, to clarify. He does not think this should be ever codified as a speech code. I 1,000 billion% agree. That is why this bill cannot and does not touch speech. There's never been an allegation that any bill like this one, which is in several states now, has ever been used to silence or chill speech, because it cannot be used that way. Our definition is only triggered if there's been an unlawful act of discrimination or a hate crime. And in that instance, the IRA definition is clear that those examples, if you look in the line above the examples, could, taking into the overall context, be discriminatory. Context is crucial here, as it is in every case of discrimination. The reason those examples are there are not because they're always anti-Semitic, and the IRA takes pains to say that in 2 different places. It's there because people sometimes do these things and use them as excuses to attack Jewish people. And I'll give you an example, if it's okay. Just recently, 2 weeks ago in New York, a man named Saddam Asad was on trial for hate crimes. And his lawyers filed in open court, and I've submitted this testimony to the previous committee, I'm happy to submit it again, and said that he didn't attack these innocent American Jews because he's an anti-Semite. He did it because he hates Israel, as if that was an excuse. And our hate crimes right now doesn't catch everything. You'll hear testimony soon from children themselves who from Fulton County who were terrorized because the swastika is not a religious symbol, and the school gaslighted them and told them that it wasn't. And you'll hear stories about people, if we have time, who have been attacked for things relating to Israel as well, and they use that as an excuse. So the examples are there just so that a judge, when there's a hate crime allegation, looks at a list of things, prior statements, prior posts, all kinds. All this definition says is, look at this list of things that could potentially be anti-Semitic so you don't miss it, because otherwise anti-Semites like to hide behind ambiguity and do things to Jewish people. So this is only if a Jew is targeted and there's an allegation. Look at this for intent.
Understood. Now, the example you just gave, what triggered this is anti-hate groups like white nationalists, white supremacists, Nazi symbols, these type things, right? Correct?
No, Senator. It's coming from all different sides.
Okay. So, okay. I was just saying the example that you gave. I think the intent of this was to just target those groups that were actually doing the crimes that were here in Georgia recently in the Jewish community. And
Senator, this bill would not touch any of the anti-Semitic literature. That's free speech. This bill wouldn't even come close to touching it. But I'm really glad you brought that up, because 2 things. Number one, the person in Georgia who is actually spreading those literatures, he is a person who has done hard time for violent racial attacks. We're worried about it. 2 weeks ago, when they declared a National Day of Hate, members of my community were afraid to go to synagogue and afraid to go to school, actually, because they're afraid of being attacked. It's not the literature. And in San Francisco, 3 weeks ago, a man who distributed that same literature, a man named Jamie Tran, then went and shot two Jewish men leaving two different synagogues on two different mornings. This bill would not touch the anti-Semitic literature. It's a free speech. But it would say that if he then, God forbid, goes and shoots somebody, it would be used as evidence of intent for why he selected his victim.
Okay.
Senator Estevez?
Sorry, Los Angeles, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning. Can you explain why this version of 144 is different than HB 30 and how it incorporates the IRA definition?
I can, yes. Which version of HB 30 are you referring to?
As passed by the House.
That's passed by the House. On line 14, do you see where it says definition? There used to be the word advisory or working, and that's been stricken.
Well, I understand what's different. I'm asking why.
Why?
Why, if uniformity is the key here, why remove the definition itself and then include a reference to a federal order?
If I may. Thank you, Senator, for that question. What happened at the Judiciary Committee is exactly the reason why we want to do it by reference, because if you put the definition into the code, it invites anybody with a pen to go and start editing out what they don't think should be anti-Semitism. In the 1 minute that it happened on the Judiciary Committee, the person who made the amendment changed a word in IRA, and from the word he changed was, he said, I don't think it should be a certain perception of Jews, it has to be a negative perception. Well, people like Elon Halmy were tortured and killed because they thought that Jews were rich. It's not a negative perception. People in Colleyville, Texas were taken hostage in a synagogue because they thought Jews were powerful. It's not a negative perception. In minutes, people go and they think, and they mean well. They mean well. They think that they have a better definition. This definition works. It's been an essential, valid tool. And just again, to go back, I'm sorry, to what Kenneth Stern wrote, and I'm happy to provide this in writing. I provided the previous committees. He said, of course, the IRA should be used for hate crimes. Of course it should. And more importantly, the other three authors also signed a letter saying the working definition, it was called working because they meant to put it to work. And that's a letter that they signed, the three of them. Andrew Baker, a person from the AJC, will come and speak to that as well. He's from that committee. And it has been put to work. They immediately gave it to prosecutors and other authorities in Europe, and it has a 20-year history there of being a tool to help us monitor anti-Semitism and to help us look for intent behind hate crimes.
Thank you. Two more questions really quickly. Mr. Chairman.
It's kind of short because otherwise we're going to run out
Okay.
of time for public testimony.
Really quickly. How many times, are we aware of other instances in Georgia law where we refer to a third party definition?
Yes.
Instead of putting the definition itself in the law.
We are. We asked Legislative Counsel to provide that for the House Judiciary Committee, and throughout Title 33, which is the insurance title, the code, Georgia Code, refers to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, NAIC, as authoritative. In Title 12, regarding to forest resources, in Title 6, in Title 12, in regard to forest resources, Chapter 6, the code recognizes the NAIC, or the North American Industry Classification Code, as authoritative. And throughout the code, the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, and its various safety codes are recognized as authoritative. In Chapter 6 of 32, that's the regulation of maintenance and use of public roadways. The code cites the National Arborist Association, International Society of Arboriculture, as of their regulations as of January 1st, 2011, as authoritative.
Okay. And the last question is how many times generally has this been used to prosecute hate crimes across the country?
A statute like this?
Yes.
Never.
Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here today. This question, Senator Robertson may actually be able to answer it better for me. I've spent a lot of time in Code 16 with you, and I feel like we spend a lot of time writing definitions or clarifying definitions in Code 16. To your knowledge, is there any incident, because this is about a crime, are there instances within that title where we don't define the definition explicitly? Or are we, like, to your knowledge, do we ever reference somewhere outside of that code, or do we not just name the definition?
The question's for Senator Robertson.
Yes.
I think in Title 16, a lot of times the way we write the code are based on case law. because we're dealing with criminal acts that happen in other places. And I think Title 40 is where we would probably find more definitions as associated with traffic safety and things of that nature, that are definitions that were codified by the federal government and sent down because of federal highways and other things. But in Title 16, I think the vast majority of that is based on case law. And looking at case law, looked at a case yesterday similar to this where it didn't reference the definition, but what it did was explain how this bill and the definition, the way this bill is defined, is applicable in the courtroom. And I'm sure the attorney will correct me if I'm wrong, which I am occasionally, that a crime occurs. Crime occurs, and what this legislation does is allow law enforcement to look for evidence related to this that caused the crime. In other words, if somebody stands in the middle of the street and yells, "I hate Israel," that's fine. It's when there's an act that follows that you can draw a line from that act back to them standing in the street saying, "I hate Israel." The same thing as if I went out there and made racist remarks on a regular basis and then went and followed through. And I will briefly say this: the individual that they are looking at for spreading this literature, while this literature is free speech, this is a legitimate threat. I have a very, very good understanding of this individual because he happens to be from my district, or was until he was banished. But by the court, not by me. But to answer your question, Title 40 would fall in line more of that than Title 16.
One follow-up. So you've said repeatedly that this is only as it relates to if there was a crime that happened beforehand. But lines 22 say that all state agencies shall consider anti-Semitism as evidence of discriminatory intent for any criminal or non-civil law or policy. So the way I read that, that means that this is going to come up in any state agency. So this could imply, say, to our schools, to our university system, that this exact definition, and because you all, instead of giving us what we had previously from the House, because you've referenced the entirety of the IRA definition, that includes the examples.
Yes.
Which explicitly say that if you believe that the state of Israel is racist, that is anti-Semitic, then this would apply to our university setting where this has become, we have letters, tons of letters in here from students who've had this IRA definition used against them from their speech. And so I am gravely concerned because it's not just about a predicate to a hate crime. Lines 22 explicitly state that it applies to all state agencies. So please explain to me how
absolutely.
I am wrong, if
Sure.
I am.
I don't want to say that you're wrong. I just want to explain what the bill does. The acts that it's referring to are unlawful, illegal, discriminatory conduct. It's not just acts, and it applies to all state agencies, and I'll give you an excellent example of why. You brought up schools. You're going to hear testimony from children who were terrorized in their public schools, and the school administrators wrung their hands, and they said, well, we don't know what anti-Semitism is. We're not sure what it looks like. Swastikas, kill the Jews, gas the Jews, terrorize. Fulton County wouldn't correct this until the Department of Education and the federal government came in and threatened their funding and their accreditation. By the way, that's why you want to tie it to the DOE. We want the exact definition that the federal government uses. Now, I've seen those cases on your list. I want to say this. Almost every one of those cases are false. They're full of things that are not true, and I'm happy to submit in writing a rebuttal of every single one of those. But I will tell you this in a short response: none of them, not one of them, involves a law like this. None of them. All of them, even the ones that some of them don't even involve IRA. The ones that involve IRA don't involve a law like this. They involve the possible use of IRA as a speech code. The ones that involve a law involve Title VI, which is already in existence and will continue to be in existence. This law would not change an iota. It doesn't affect free speech on a campus. It doesn't affect speech in a public school. State agencies should use this in case there's a problem in their district, like Fulton County had just a couple years ago.
And why is it not acceptable for us to just write exactly as IRA states what the definition of anti-Semitism is? Why are you referencing the entire thing with the examples? And that was the bill that we received from the House. It just says anti-Semitism means a certain perception of Jews, right? Like it says the definition. Why are you all so insistent that we include the reference specifically to IRA and now to the Federal Civil Rights Act? That is also like, just help me understand why we're in this different posture.
Sure. First of all, again, what happened at the last committee is why you don't want to put the definition in word by word, because people then take a pen and edit it. Another senator said she'd be okay if we just cut a different 2 lines. Last year, a different senator said she wanted to cut 7 lines. Those examples are there because they're crucial. Those are some of the most common excuses that people give to hurt Jewish people. It doesn't matter. You can hate Israel. You can hate Jews. It doesn't matter. You can say whatever you want. And the IRA definition, again, clearly says these are not always anti-Semitic. They could be. They're there because some people say that they're never anti-Semitic, even like Saddam Assad, when you're attacking physically, violently Jews. They say, it's not. There was a case in Germany, Wuppertal, Germany, in 2017. A group firebombed a synagogue. And they said to the judge, when they wanted a hate crime enhancement, it's not anti-Semitism, we just don't like Israel. And the judge accepted that and removed the hate crime enhancement. In response, Germany adopted the IRA definition with the examples, because that is what anti-Semites do, and that's why it's important.
Okay, we're going to have to stop with the questions right now and move to public testimony. And unfortunately, we are now behind on time, so we're going to have 10 minutes for each side. So we're going to start with the people who are opposed to the bill, and I'm going to ask the author to stand by, and we'll call you back at the end. First person signed up, and keep in mind that however long you take is using the total time. So if you want more people to speak, you'll need to make your points quickly. Renee Albubani, I probably butchered your name.
Al-Nubani, thank you. Members of the Children and Families Committee, my name is Renee Al-Nubani, and as a Palestinian and a board member and incoming president for the Georgia Tech Muslim Students Association, I am giving this testimony in opposition to HB 144, which has been replaced with the bill text of former HB 30. Please do not vote any version of this bill out of this committee. This year, our MSA held a year-long educational series highlighting different genocides and human rights violations taking place around the world. In February, our MSA planned to hold an event about Palestine as part of this series. When reaching out to speakers from Jewish Voice for Peace, we found out what happened years prior at YDSA's Palestine 101 event, and how they were put on a 9-month disciplinary probation after complaints that Hillel made. Georgia Tech later adopted the IRA definition and 11 examples of anti-Semitism as a result. We initially intended on discussing the topic of the legality of the State of Israel, and one of the IRA examples of anti-Semitism states claiming that the existence of a State of Israel is a racist endeavor. Considering this example and how we could be labeled as anti-Semitic, we decided not to discuss the legality of the State of Israel during the event for fear of what the consequences might be. We communicated this to the guest speakers to ensure that they would not discuss it. We reached out to YDSA to ask them about what happened years prior, and they gave us suggestions for how to proceed with our event cautiously. We also contacted and met with Palestine Legal to give us advice on whether or not we should hold the event, what our legal rights are in the scenario, and how to ensure the safety of the students attending. Based on the advice given to us, we took the following measures to ensure our safety. We video recorded the event to capture if anyone acts violently. We required people to RSVP for the event, and we only allowed people to ask questions through an online form for sensory purposes. All of these are things we have not done for any other events like this in the past. Had it not been for the IRA definition, we would not have had to suppress the speech of the speakers and students attending or take extra measures to ensure the safety of our students. This bill is not about combating anti-Semitism. It is a bill that will silence those advocating for Palestinians and against human rights violations in Israel, infringing upon freedom of speech. Thank you for letting me give this testimony.
Thank you. Next is Fatima Chaudhry. And we're down to 7 minutes and 43.
Good morning. Members of the Children and Families Committee, my name is Fatima Chowdhury, and as the current president for and on behalf of the Georgia Tech Muslim Students Association, I am giving the testimony on opposition to HB 144, which has been replaced with the bill text of former HB 30. Please do not vote on any version of this bill out of the Senate Children and Families Committee. Renee spoke previously about the effect the IHRA definition has had on our MSA in suppressing speech, and I want to further discuss the extent to which this could affect students and college campuses. Many students have been interested in advocating against the IHRA definition at Georgia Tech, but if any rendition of this bill is passed in the Senate and signed into law, the issue would become much larger and become more challenging for us to repeal. While proponents of this bill suggest that the definition of anti-Semitism outlined will only be used by state agencies, there is nothing stopping schools and universities from viewing this as the official state of Georgia definition of anti-Semitism and using it to suppress speech even further. For Georgia Tech specifically, this bill will affirm the school's leadership that their adoption of the IHRA was appropriate and acceptable under state code, leading to greater suppression of speech and targeting of Georgia Tech students and organizations who speak out in support of Palestine. The claim is made that the purpose of the bill is to protect the Jewish people from hate crimes, but it will only increase hostility and violence towards those who advocate for Palestinians, especially Muslim women who are easily identifiable because of their hijab and who have been the target of countless hate crimes, threats, and verbal assaults even on college campuses. Every year, we have a few instances of verbal assaults on Georgia Tech Muslim women, and I want to urge that while you may hear from the opposing side that anti-Semitism should be considered equal to the criticism of Israel, there is no country, no state, and no single authority on this earth that is exempt from having the ability to be criticized by the people. And I think if you were to equate criticism of a state to the racist and persecution of a people, then there is a dangerous boundary that you are crossing. We urge this committee to protect free speech and support Georgia students by voting no on HB 144. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you show me in the bill where it says you can't criticize the state of Israel? Because the way I'm reading this, all that matters is if you have an act, and they will tie that act as was motivated by discriminatory intent. So
right.
the only way it would suppress speech is if you're motivated to go do a violent act.
I don't
That is
think
the
so.
only way that you're going to be negatively impacted by your speech, is if
So-
your intent is to commit violence towards someone. That is what this bill says.
Right, but let's take back into consideration what Renee said about specifically what happened in Georgia Tech, which led to the IHRA definition being adopted at our school. YDSA held an event that criticized the state of Israel, that brought to light issues that were going on, whether there were humanitarian violations or whatnot, that Israel was doing in Palestine at the time, right? That specific criticism of that state, not advocating for any violence, not advocating kill all the Jews or any other type of heinous and anti-Semitist action, was criticized as going against the Jewish people. Why is it that going to criticize and going to talk about a certain state and their certain actions that they've taken against people that have been well documented by many international agencies is seen as equal to the criticization and the prejudice against a Jewish people?
This bill doesn't say.
But you're saying it's an act, right?
No,
So-
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying what the bill says.
Right,
The
the
bill
bill
says
says-
you can say whatever you want, but as soon as a violent act is committed, they can tie that back to the
So,
speech.
I understand.
So if there's no fear of doing a violent act and there's no intent to commit a violent act, you can say whatever you want.
So
That is the point of this bill. It's very clear.
Okay, so my question to you would be,
You
what
don't
would
ask
happen?
questions. I ask the questions.
I think, okay.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
we have another question.
Real quick, you used the Georgia Tech example,
Mhm.
and you said y'all held an event there,
Yeah,
and-
YDSA
right,
held the
okay.
event there.
And you said y'all were criticized?
They were criticized by the
Okay, hold up, just give me a second. Who was criticized?
YDSA
Okay,
at
who
the
were-
time,
Who were they criticized by?
the Georgia Tech leadership.
Okay, thank you. Was any student expelled or suspended?
No, but the organization was almost banned.
Okay, almost banned. I've almost been hit by cars. So let's
Okay.
be very specific, because myself and Senator Jackson, as we were talking before, laws are laws, they're very specific. So let's don't make hypotheticals, and let's be very specific. To Senator Brass's point, as I said before, there's got to be the thread tying the two together. If it's not there, then I can stand on the street out there and talk bad about anybody I want to.
And Madam Chair,
Move on.
I do want to apologize. Just the way the committee process works, we ask questions up here. I didn't mean to jump you, so
I don't know. Personally, I think
Stop there.
The IRA definition is not in the bill, but it's the IRA definition that is pulling it's referencing that. That's the problem. It doesn't say it in the bill, but the IRA definition is pulling the very question that you are asking, like, where is it? It is implied in the IRA definition.
We're going to have to move on here. We're seriously running out of time. So
okay.
we have 5 minutes left for testimony from the con side. Annie Jelani.
Chairwoman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Annie Galani, and I'm a political strategist at the Asian American Advocacy Fund, a grassroots organization with a mission to uplift the voices of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and Native Hawaiians in Georgia. I'm speaking to you today in opposition of HB 144. I want to first acknowledge how inappropriate and undemocratic it is to, just two legislative days before sine die, strip a bill of all its current language and funnel in a bill that failed to make it out of its original committee. HB 30 was heard in judiciary in both the House and the Senate. Just 3 days ago, after significant opposition to the measure, we watched it get tabled in Senate Judiciary. It is now before you in this committee. HB 30, now HB 144, is a violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. It disproportionately suppresses the freedom of speech of Palestinian Americans and applies in both the context of hate crimes and discriminatory intent. 7 of the 11 contemporary examples of anti-Semitism outlined in the 2016 IRA definition have to do with the State of Israel. For context, one of them claims it is anti-Semitic to say that the State of Israel is a racist endeavor, which would bar someone from stating that Israel is an apartheid state. While the sponsors of the bill suggest that it has nothing to do with protecting Israel, they have publicly made comments stating that people who oppose this bill do so because they support Palestine rather than Israel. These comments make the sponsors' intent clear. This bill is about protecting Israel, and the IRA examples that protect the State of Israel at the expense of freedom of speech will be weaponized. Our organization is particularly concerned about this bill's impact upon Palestinian Jordans exercising their freedom of speech to protest Israel's human rights abuses. This bill explicitly states that anti-Semitism will be used as evidence of discriminatory intent under both criminal and civil code, not solely in the hate crimes context that proponents claim the bill will apply in, which we also oppose. With the IRA definition conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, this leaves the door open for any actions by individuals who criticize Israel to be perceived as discriminatory. Because of the definition cited in this bill, and especially the language used of rhetorical manifestations, we are very concerned that this language will be used to target peaceful protests by Georgia residents who seek to voice opinions about the occupation of Palestine. In fact, ever since the IRA definition was adopted by Georgia Tech, students have been afraid of speaking out in support of Palestine due to the risk of their organization being suppressed. I want to be clear that AAAF will oppose any rendition of this bill. Although we remain steadfast against anti-Semitism, we do not see any use of the IRA definition and examples, whether explicitly stated or not, to be acceptable. Due to the IRA definition suppressing freedom of speech, the bill's disproportionate impact on Palestinian Americans, and the bill's use in multiple criminal and civil contexts, we urge this committee to vote no on HB 144. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Megan Gordon, and we're down to 2.5 minutes.
You lining up to be next to Fat Father? Good morning, y'all. I will be quite brief. My name is Megan Gordon. I'm the policy manager with the Council on American Islamic Relations. Y'all have already heard this is not the version that passed the House. The House Judiciary Committee had 3 very long hearings on this bill. And I know my audience, I know the Senate does not feel bound to do anything that the House does. This bill also didn't come out of the Judiciary Committee. And I know this landed with y'all. I mean, I don't actually know when it landed with y'all, but it couldn't have been 72 hours ago. If this was as simple as predicate to hate crimes, it would not have spent 3 committee hearings in House Judiciary. If it was that simple, I think Senate Judiciary probably would have passed it. If it, we have had 55 minutes almost in here today, and y'all have had this bill for a couple days. It is the first year of a 2-year session. There is time to continue to vet this bill. We don't have to rush. We don't have to make a decision today. And so all I'm asking of y'all is to just not take action on this today and allow time for the process to work. Thank you.
Excuse me, real quick.
Yes, sir.
You came and saw me yesterday, and you gave me your number. And what organization do you represent?
I work with the Council on American Islamic Relations.
Okay, is it true or not true that the FBI has distanced itself from working with your group because of ties to Hamas?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Sir,
I appreciate your answer.
I've only been with the organization for
You've answered my
a
question.
couple weeks. Okay.
I'm sorry, what's your name?
My name is Fahed Abu Akel.
Yeah, you're not next on the list, unfortunately.
I know, but since our time is limited and I was born there.
There are about 8 other people that
but you
are
said
out
there's
there.
only 3 minutes.
There's 1 minute left.
Okay, and I'll
and
take-
you're jumping the line in front of 5 other people.
But we agree that I need to speak.
Elise Cohen is next.
Okay.
Good
And
morning.
unfortunately, you've only got 1 and 15 left.
Okay. I would say more about myself. I'll just say my name is Elise Cohen. I'm an anthropologist and also Jewish Studies and Middle East educator, scholar, activist, and writer, Jewish life cycle facilitator. Almost 20 years, I led delegations to Israel and Palestine, and I also have lived in Israel multiple times for research and for working with Palestinian Jewish sectors in Israel. There's no need for this bill to define anti-Semitism. There's no consensus by the Jewish people and organizations to do so, and the controversial IRA definition could not highlight that more. As it said, Kenneth Stern, one of the lead drafters of the definition, has said that it would be weaponized to chill free speech. The push to codify this non-legally binding IRA working definition of anti-Semitism is one of a long list of ways that sadly some in our Jewish community have tried to shut down free speech related to Israel for decades. I have multiple examples of those, including personal ones, and how the university where I worked was pressured to make sure, even though I was a Jewish studies professor there and did advocacy on Palestine outside of it, that to pressure the university to make sure my contract didn't continue. I want to just actually point out that, and I wouldn't typically do this, but I think it's important to show that why the IRA examples, what the intent is about using the IRA
You're
examples.
going to need to wrap it up, Ms. Cohen.
Okay. Mark Goldfeder, legal counsel to the bill, and who has said in testimonies that he made the model for this bill, has written articles in the Washington Times and Mishpacha about the Palestinian Nakba, or history, calling it a foundational myth of forced displacement. Demonstrably false. The entire story is a lie. Nakba mythology, a blood libel, and anti-Jewish information.
Thank
He
you, Ms.
denies. Thank you.
We're going to go to the people who are in support of the bill. And again, we only have 10 minutes, so please keep your remarks brief. Beth and Aaron gone.
We're going to go together and separate. We're only 3 minutes total. We've timed ourselves. Okay, so what? I know, well, I want to make sure. Okay, I just need my glasses. I'm sorry, I'm going fast. I'm a little nervous. Okay. I should have had this ready, but I dropped my phone. Okay. Good afternoon, honorable members, or good morning, I should say. Honorable members and chairwoman of the committee. My name is Beth, and I'm in front of you today to discuss why the definition of anti-Semitism is so important. My twin boys were terrorized with anti-Semitic gestures and swastikas. This went on for 18 months. I was told that this was not a swastika, but a peace symbol. I was not taken seriously until I was contacted by the Department of Justice and the Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights. And that's when the school board decided to take action. The Department of Education said if the state cannot figure it out, they would figure it out for the county and take away the accreditation. My situation had escalated to death threats and physical assaults, so I had to pull my kids out of school early. Our case is now known as the worst anti-Semitic incidences in schools in the history of the state of Georgia. It seems obvious that this Kill the Jews picture that my son found in the bathroom and on his locker is anti-Semitic, but it was not. We were told that it wasn't anti-Semitic. Unfortunately, this is going on today. I am currently advocating for a mixed racial student that is Jewish, who defines herself as Jewish, who is experiencing the same hate that we did. And I've advocated in other schools and counties throughout the state of Georgia, including but not limited to Fulton, Gwinnett, DeKalb, and Atlanta. Why? Because there's no definition. The school was afraid to act. The police could not act. And if there was a definition of anti-Semitism, there would not have been a question of what this was and how to act. I stand before you today to encourage an act, to encourage the definition of anti-Semitism so no other family has to endure the pain that we went through. I ask you to vote in favor of HB 144 so my family's suffering wasn't in vain. Thank you. You're on.
Yeah, I know. Madam Chairwoman, honorable members of this committee, first of all, thank you for letting me testify today. My name is Aaron, and I'm testifying to you today in favor of House Bill 144, in part based on my own personal experiences with anti-Semitism. As my mother previously pointed out, me and my brother were terrorized for 18 months at our school, finding graffiti on the walls such as "Kill the Jews," "Gas the Jews," along with, I believe I found 15 swastikas in the 18 months that this went on. And I also had students occasionally surround me and throw money at me while screaming "Jew me" down in my face. I believe this wouldn't have happened had there been a definition of anti-Semitism, in part because everyone I went to, teachers, staff, administrators, even social workers, and even the principal at one point, all told me the same thing, that what I was experiencing did not amount to anti-Semitism, rather it was a peace symbol, and that the graffiti I was finding amounted to nothing but students pulling pranks. The graffiti appeared on a near weekly basis, and it got so bad to the point where I contemplated suicide at only 13 years old. And ever since, I've been in therapy. Had there been a definition, this would not have happened, and there would have been no doubt as to whether or not the graffiti I was finding was anti-Semitic in nature. Such a definition would not have allowed such an action for such a long period of time. But as painful and traumatic as this experience has been, and as upset as I was to wake up at 7 a.m. to come here today, I'm here today because I don't want this to happen to anyone else, let alone have someone successfully contemplate suicide because no one acted. So because not everyone, I cannot talk today, I apologize. Because not everyone has such loving friends and family who are fortunate enough to recognize signs of suicide. So please, to ensure that no one ever has to go through the unimaginable pain and trauma that I went through, and to make sure that everyone has a safe environment in which they can learn, work, or just be themselves, where they don't have to worry about being targeted because of who they are, please vote in favor of this bill.
Thank you very much. Julie Katz, we've got 5 minutes and 26 seconds left.
Good morning.
My name is Julie Katz, and I am the Associate Director of American Jewish Committee's Atlanta office. We are the global advocacy organization on behalf of the Jewish people, and anti-Semitism is one of our areas of expertise. So someone who spoke in opposition of this bill said if it were that simple, we would have just passed it. And unfortunately, that is the problem, is that anti-Semitism is not simple. It manifests differently than other forms of hate. A little over a year ago, a terrorist entered a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, and held 4 Jews hostage. His motivation was to try to release another terrorist from prison a few miles away. And he chose the synagogue because he believed that Jews had an extraordinary amount of influence in government and the media, and that if he held these Jews hostage, then he would be able to help this terrorist, get released from prison. When the FBI released a statement, the first statement they released while this hostage situation was ongoing, they said that this person was not motivated by anti-Semitism. Let that sink in. One of the oldest tropes of anti-Semitism in the books, the idea of Jewish power and control, was not recognized by arguably the most important law enforcement agency in the country. And that is why we need this definition so badly, because it is not simple. Anti-Semitism is multifaceted and manifests in so many different ways, which is why the IHRA definition, compiled by experts for years, gathering together to put together a definition that encompasses or tries to encompass all these different types of anti-Semitism to help people recognize it. That is why this is so important. I will finish with a few statistics from the American Jewish Committee's most recent State of Anti-Semitism report. 1/3 of Americans have never heard the term anti-Semitism or do not know what it means. 9 out of 10 American Jews are concerned about anti-Semitism, and 4 out of 10 American Jews believe that their status as American Jews is less secure than it was a year ago. And that is a 10% increase from a year ago. 10%. So please stand with the Jewish community, help us address these hate crimes, and vote in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi Nidich, and we have just a couple minutes left. He's not here. Okay. Wayne Kyle,
thank you. Members of the committee, my name is Wayne Kyle. I'm the CEO of Hillels of Georgia. Our organization manages 24 campuses across the state of Georgia, supports 7,000 Jewish students. Our students are subjected on campus to incidents that don't make the news, and they're terrified. We had a student who had to walk out of a class because professors called Judaism a brutal and gruesome religion. In explaining the Exodus, the same professor said, how could it take 40 years? Maybe they were lazy. So substitute Judaism for African American or any other ethnic group and get a sense of how that student felt. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. The IHRA definition talks about Israel being a racist state. It has caused apoplectic contortions. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that the Chinese government is guilty of crimes. But I don't believe that that belief allows me to go and subjugate Chinese people to violence or discrimination. Okay? The type of Israel rhetoric that's being referenced here, okay, is being used by people on our college campuses against Jewish students. And why? What did they have to do with the Israeli government? They don't have a direct line to the Knesset. They don't. Yet they're being harassed simply because they are Jewish. The escalation of anti-Semitism isn't up for debate. It's happening around us. How we decide to step up and fight it, that's on us. I get in front of university committees. They don't understand Title VI, Title IX. Well, I'm going to tell you our students aren't being harassed and bullied or publicly shamed because they light candles on Friday nights or because they pray in Hebrew. They're being harassed because they choose to go to Israel or vacation there in their Jewish homeland. It has nothing to do with religion. And the bill in front of you allows us to set a standard. We need to protect our students and give universities something that they can set policies around, and this bill does that. I ask you to be brave. I ask you to ignore the noise behind me, who are from people who haven't read the bill and haven't read the definition. I could care less if someone thinks Israel is a racist state. I don't care. I don't care if someone's critical of the Israeli government. I'm critical of the Israeli government. But what I do care is if you use that to attack Jewish people on the street. And that's what's happening.
Thank you
Okay?
very much. We're out of time. Senator Robertson.
Madam Chair, I move this committee pass substitute House Bill 144 LC 491454 S as in Sierra.
Second. Okay, we're out of time. Any really quick discussion? Then we're going to vote.
Motion to table.
Is there a second? Need a second. Okay. That motion takes priority, so we'll vote on that now. So all in favor of the motion to table, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, the motion fails.
Point of order. Point of order. Madam Chair, we have a member that is not part of the Children and Families Committee.
He's an ex officio member.
It's not listed as ex officio.
Right, we have a letter from the Lieutenant Governor's office. Because of the conflict with time, we were afraid we were not going to have enough members to take a vote on this measure. So I can provide the letter to you if you would like to see it afterward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It would have been nice to have seen that, the committee members to know that before. But thank you.
Okay, now we're going to vote on the motion that is on the floor from Senator Robertson. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, did you get the count? Okay. 2 opposed. The motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you.